Now, Gongchik. Today's Gongchik statement is statement number 7. Statement number 7 of chapter 4. In skillful conduct, there cannot be non-virtue. So this is an important line. In skillful conduct, there cannot be non-virtue. So skillful conduct in Sanskrit, upaya, or skillful means. So a lot of times, right, we have heard of this skillful means, saying how, bodhisattva have to practice, cultivate skillful means. So with a combination of skillful means and wisdom, clear understanding, then we can become better and better and better at being good to all other sentient beings. But sometimes this idea of skillful means can be a little confusing, because it's sometimes if teachers are not careful, they might make skillful means sound like a license to kill. Wait, that's a James Bond movie title, right? License to kill. Anyway, this expression, license to kill, as in like, so not literally killing, but that you have special license, because you are bodhisattva, you have special license. In fact, this is not, a lot of these views that Kyobpa Rinpoche are kind of addressing, and you should not think that these views are like wrong. They're not wrong. Right? In fact, most of these views you can find them one form or another in the sutras or the tantras that lends themselves to this or that interpretation. So a lot of times what Kyobpa Rinpoche is addressing, it's not so much that those views are outright wrong, but that those views or those opinions are based on slight subtle misunderstanding of the fundamental principles. And because of slightly misunderstanding the fundamental principles, they kind of lead to rather potentially dangerous conclusions. And so it's almost like, many of the views that he seems to oppose or he is addressing or correcting, it's not that they are outright wrong. Perhaps you can even think of it as, first we need to first, we probably have that kind of understanding, which is better than before we started practicing Dharma. And then we might have a more preliminary understanding of a particular point in the Dharma, and then Kyobpa's statement takes us to a more profound, more careful understanding, a further refined understanding. So this Vajra statement, in the performance, in the exercise, in the practice of skillful means, if a skillful means skillful method, right? If the method is truly and truly skillful, then absolutely no non-virtue is involved. Right? It's basically what the statement is saying. As long as there is even one speck of dust worth of non-virtue, then is not perfect skillful means. In that sense, you could say that Buddhas, their actions are completely skillful because it doesn't even have, and they don't even have one speck of dust worth of non-virtue. So going back to Captain Compassion, right? it's a mix of virtue and non-virtue in the actions that he had to do. So it's not perfect skillful means, but it's a type of skillful means that he engaged in. That's what it's saying. So for us, what does this mean? Like, well, I hope and I trust most of us in this lifetime have not been in situations, hopefully will not be in situations of Captain Compassion. And so we don't have life situations where we have to make that decision, should I kill this person or not? Hopefully you have not experienced that. Hopefully you will not experience that in this life. So the take-home lesson is more, I think, about, being careful, with how we might use the Dharma to justify our afflictive emotions and act in a way that is unskillful, and yet, think or pretend that, oh, this is out of skillful means. In Dharma centers, for example, like we work together with other people, we are all volunteers, and sometimes, especially if you're put in a leadership position and then things don't get done, and then you get angry and you yell at someone, it's very easy, when you have this idea of skillful means, to say to yourself, oh, I that was my skillful means, I yelled at that person. I was really mean to that person. Oh, that's skillful means, See, the problem, not problem, we should not see this as problem. We should just see this as, this is the fact of being alive, It doesn't mean that with Dharma practice, it's all just clear-cut, It's not, The fact of being alive, the fact of being human, the fact of being, with others is that, often we're in situations where it's not so easy to choose, what we know to be the right way to act, right? So we become angry, we lose our patience, we might even say something that is really kind of hurtful or harmful to someone, we should not, like let this teaching of upaya make us kind of think, oh, that was skillful means. Maybe at most, maybe it should be a version of, like a tiny version of Captain Compassion, meaning at least you should say, no, that wasn't really skillful means, a little bit of skillful means is in there, but then there's also non-virtues mixed in there, and so not completely skillful means. Next time, I can do better, I should do better, right? Then as there's another teaching that kind of complicates this, doesn't make it so easy, and that's my point about it's don't just be naive and think, oh, as long as I practice Dharma, it'll be so easy, And sometimes, yes, teachers, including myself, talk about Dharma practice as if it's so easy, Yeah, one way it's so easy, but then another way it's not so easy. Meaning, there's another teaching that says, especially when you're in a Dharma situation, you should try to experience everything with pure view, pure vision. Right? Especially this is secret mantra training. Everything you should do your best to experience with pure view. That's part of the Idam training. Idam training is to train that you are Buddha and your surrounding is a mandala and all the beings around you are part of your emanation. So in that case, right, you should perceive everything as Buddha-like. Yeah. And that, again, the theory of that, really good. The practice of that, not that it's not good, not easy. And so if we get yelled at by someone at the Dharma Center, we should, this is like Marpa's blessings to Milarepa. We might say something like that, Famously, right? Marpa was very tough with Milarepa. Then we said, especially if it's our teachers, But then, of course, that's where the complication is, If that happens a lot, and the teacher is always yelling and screaming at people, at the drop of a pin, the teacher, burst out, with temper. Or there's another style, in front. You see that a lot, Then when the door closes, the teacher behaves like a tyrant, And maybe the teacher is at the level of Marpa, who knows? But more likely is the teacher is also having his or her own karmic stuff. So we have to balance all of this, But main thing is, as Gachen Rinpoche says, one time he talked about this. He says, in the text it says, teacher should examine and observe a potential student for 12 years before agreeing to serve as a teacher. And students, potential students, should observe someone for 12 years before asking a person to be their teacher. So Gachen Rinpoche said, that's the advice in the classic advice, And then he said, but in my case, he said, my own experience, I've come to the conclusion, he says, just for me, he says, he says, I offer this for you to think about. He says, just for me, he says, I find that if I start to examine other people, he says, then, and Rinpoche is very humble, he says, then the more fault I see, the more fault I go looking for. Then he said, then nobody I can accept as teacher. He said, not only that, nobody I can accept as student. Nobody is good enough to be my student. Nobody is good enough to be my teacher. Then he says, then I cannot benefit myself. I cannot benefit others. So he says, at some point, he said, I stopped scrutinizing either teachers or students. He said, I learned to perceive all teachers as Buddha Shakyamuni. And I learned to accept all students as sincere. There is something very special being said here. Which is, in the end, Buddha says, examine your own mind. So what it means for me, Rinpoche is sharing this very special instruction. And what it means for me is, I feel you cannot take Rinpoche's advice and try to run a Dharma center or a Dharma community like that. Because there will be a lot of problems. Especially if we enforce that, tell everybody, don't examine anyone, don't examine. And that is like a way to silence, people when there are problems. Problems, of course, we are all humans. There are problems that will arise, Or I said, considering in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, I think Dalai Lama number 11 and 12, they were poisoned. Murdered. Not ordinary lamas, Dalai Lamas. There are problems in the reality of dealing with each other, all of that, without needing to demonize anyone. And we're all working with our stuff. On the other hand, we are taught, we are challenged, we are encouraged to train in pure vision. So both are there, both are real. And we have to navigate all of that. So one very good advice is really, between scrutinizing others and scrutinizing ourselves, given how little time we have, better to scrutinize ourselves. Which is not to say, that maybe there are potential problems out there. And in order to protect others, we might have to intervene. Including telling potential harm, please don't do this, stop. Right? But then that's all we can do sometimes, that's it. We don't have time. And what Rinpoche says is also true, I can appreciate that, Once I start finding fault, in someone, one follows another. It begins to snowball. Then nobody qualifies to be student, and nobody qualifies to be teacher. Then you are stuck here in a very bad place, right? You're stuck here in a very dark place. That's in the end what you're going to end up with. Even Jesus they killed. There's no end to finding fault, because we all have faults. So with the time that we have, what should we do? Find faults? If you have the ability and the power to change and correct those faults, very good. But realistically, right? What kinds of faults and problems can we try to clear? Our own. But important, don't do it in a self-centered way. I have no time for all of you. I'm just going to work on my problems, my fault, and go away. That is what we call lesser vehicle. Lesser vehicle is not about, this kind of Buddhism or that kind of Buddhism. It's not about, the Buddhists in that country, they are lesser vehicle. The Buddhists in that country, they are lesser vehicle. Or the Buddhists in that temple. Look at the shape of the roof, it is from this country, that country. They are lesser vehicle. No. Likewise, you cannot just point and say, look, that is the Tibetan. They are the great vehicle. Great or lesser is motivation. So we should practice purifying, clearing our own faults, our own mental defilements, motivated by I will become better for this world. I will become better for people around me, right? Starting with people around me, people further out, and people further out, and people further out. The more I work on removing my mental defilements, my faults, the better it will be for all those around me. Just start from there. And ultimately, until I am Buddha, then I am one. Only Buddhas are faultless. We are trained, for example, to see our teachers as faultless. But that is a subjective training, not objectively. Don't get those things confused. Okay, so skillful means? This topic is not easy. Quickly, Khenpo Kunpal, very short his commentary. He says, in the conduct of such bodhisattvas who are skillful in taming beings that are ripe and ready to be tamed, there can only be virtue. There cannot be any real non-virtue. However, if there were any non-virtues involved, that cause would bring them to fall to the lower realms. And benefiting other sentient beings also will not be accomplished, since darkness cannot dispel darkness. So sometimes we say, oh, yeah, what happened was terrible, but it helped others. No, Is it skillful means, It's not skillful means when others are harmed. Really, really skillful means without non-virtue, they say, is more rare than. So here, very sobering. And we use this, as our own standard for ourselves, So each time, we get in situations where we are going to get angry or, do something that we know on some level is not virtuous, and then we might recruit idea of skillful means and say, oh, but this is skillful means, Remember this. Actual skillful means without non-virtue is more difficult than one person shooting an arrow from this side, another person over there shooting an arrow from that side, and the chances of these two arrows in the air touching each other, the tip of the arrowhead meeting, in midair. Skillful means without non-virtue is more rare than this. Skillful means without faults has to be so precise. So in one of Jigten Sumgon's teachings, he says, true wisdom is ultimately about skillful means. Although we talk about skillful means as one side, right? Wisdom as the other side. He says actual true skillful means, is in fact wisdom. And true wisdom, truly wisdom, if it is truly wisdom, also is none other than true skillful means. There in that teaching, he's sort of criticizing this people who think that wisdom is, oh, I understand emptiness, I understand emptiness of emptiness, and I understand emptiness of emptiness of emptiness, all these high-sounding philosophy. He says that is not true wisdom, he says. True wisdom is the wisdom that knows what to say to someone that will help them dispel their mental defilements, their afflictive emotions. And he gave examples. He said, when the Buddha told this one disciple, here, take this broom, sweep the floor. And when you sweep the floor, you say, out with defilements, gone with defilements, out with defilements. He says, when you sweep this side, you say, out with defilements. When you sweep this side, you say it in your mind, gone are the defilements, out the defilements, gone the defilements, he says. And this is in the life story of the Buddha. Because there's one disciple, it said that he cannot remember anything, anyone, even the Buddha teaching him any teachings, in the moment he listens, and after that he's like, I don't remember. So he's not making progress at all. He tries to meditate, like everybody else, sit there, let body settle, mind settle, and then his mind is gone. He cannot remember. So then when the Buddha looked into, and with his wisdom eye saw this person's situation, Buddha said, here, no need to meditate anymore. No need to go attend teachings anymore. Here, this is a broom. I want you to sweep. I want you to sweep this floor here. Every day, just come and sweep. It said like sweeping, sweeping, sweeping. He achieved the liberation of an arhat. Jigten Sumgon used that example. Jigten Sumgon says, the ability of the Buddha to come up with a method for this person comes from true wisdom. Wisdom is not philosophizing. Now, other people will recognize this as and say, oh, but isn't that an example of skillful means? It's not that Kyobpa Rinpoche doesn't understand the difference between skillful means and wisdom. But see, Kyobpa Rinpoche is always pointing to a deeper connection. He says, ultimate skillful means can only arise from true wisdom. And true wisdom, what is the purpose of true wisdom in the end? The wisdom that can set us free. Otherwise, what's the point of wisdom? Right? So you see, Jigten Sumgon's way of teaching, always goes to something deeper. So today we stop here.